Hey guys, I'm back with another conversation to share with you. This time it's with Kylar Dunn. Kylar is a personal trainer, a body worker, massage therapist, and a life coach. He's also highly sensitive and empathic and was one of my first male clients that I ever had. Kylar and I have always wanted to have a conversation regarding our background. We have sort of similar religious backgrounds. We've had to go through a similar process of deprogramming a lot of programming that came from the lack matrix, and what it's like to translate that into your body as an empath, what it feels like to deprogram. This is a really casual conversation where Kylar asks me a lot of questions too, so it gives you an opportunity to hear a little bit more about my background as well. If you want to follow Kylar, I put his social media links in the description box below. Also, please share any thoughts or comments you have about this conversation. I would love to hear it. Hope you guys enjoy. You've been working with me for a long time. It's been like 4 years now, you said?
Well, I must have found you sometime in the summer of 2016, and so I was listening to your videos for a while, and then at one point you were offering, it might have been the Gin Magic class. I'm trying to remember which one it was, but
like the
I was like,
original,
yes.
original?
Yeah, it was,
Yeah.
yeah, because I think I've been through like 3 or 4 versions.
Yeah, pretty much.
And it's always amazing, and it's like those. I was listening to the intro to the one that's coming up the other day that you posted, and I was listening to it again. I was like, I kind of forgot how many of those things came from that particular class.
Yeah, exactly.
And because it's been part of our conversations the whole time, so I knew I got most of those concepts from you, and some of those like from Teal Swan or whatever, I think. But like it's been so much a part of like my transformation process now that I forgot it was like that particular class had all that stuff in it.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, that's cool. But I think it must have been like really early, like maybe January 2017, that we signed up for that, somewhere around there. And it came with like 3 mentoring sessions.
Oh yeah.
And
Is
yeah,
that
and
the
so
first
though,
time we worked together? Was that?
yeah, it was like early 2017, because I know that it was through during one of our conversations that year where I was talking about my work situation and my school situation, and I just really wasn't super happy, but I didn't know how to get to where I wanted to be. And it was the first time anyone asked me, you asked me, like, not thinking about the logistics and not thinking about, trying to weigh out, the benefits of one side or the other, but like, tune into your heart and what do you want to do?
Mm,
And I was like, I want to be done.
yeah.
I want to be done with this job, and I want to be done with the school, and I just want to do something totally different. And so I thought it was a big leap of faith moving from Oregon to Michigan, and it was, but it was even more dropping that job and dropping the school work I'd been doing all those years, and then traveling the country and coming back to Oregon, and then just kind of living without a plan. Like that was super crazy scary.
Yeah.
But it was in line with what my heart was. And so the whole concept of learning to trust my heart and move into actually practicing abundance was from our conversations, and from our connection.
Wow. Well, I'm actually really excited for this conversation because I remember, and I've told you a million times, like watching your journey has sort of blown me away. And I remember telling you that. And I remember when you like were like, okay, I'm done. And I remember thinking, oh shit, I hope that was the right. I mean, I didn't
Yeah, I bet.
the decision, and I believed in it. It's like, it's so interesting how one thing I love about mentoring and working with people and even being online and teaching is that it's so much easier to believe it for other people because I can just see it so clearly. And then it gives me so much hope and encouragement when I see people just take off. And you have just been taking off. And every time we talk, I have this like overwhelming sort of like nostalgia and pride, and not that I did anything, but just like I still feel proud of you, and like,
Yeah.
because it's all been you. But I have been wanting to do this conversation because I think that you, because of your upbringing, and are you okay if we talk a little bit about that too?
Yeah.
We have
Yeah, for sure.
similar,
Yeah.
different but similar upbringings, coming
Hmm.
from like a religious background, and yours was intent. Like, I, for my young years, I wasn't raised in the intensity that you were raised, but I know how hard it is to get out of shadow contracts, particularly when we've been in religion or any sort of
Hmm.
reward punishment system that's really strong, because it,
Hmm.
it can train us so powerfully out of our urge. And instead of acting on our urge, we act on, well, whatever's best for this person, or to appease these
Hmm.
people, or to be right, or to be good, or to be enough, or to be worthy. And it's so psychologically painful and draining. And you being an empath, also a massage therapist and a body worker, and having fatigue yourself and being into fitness, like,
Hmm.
your whole combo is so powerful and needed, because I know personally just how difficult it can be in the body to be an
Hmm.
empath and to absorb so much and to get fatigued and all those things. And so I'm excited for this conversation, because I want to talk about, for both of us, and this is like a two-way thing, what it
Yeah.
felt like, what it feels like to go from lack to abundance, that mindset and that jump,
Hmm.
and the little hacks along the way. And because I've found that it's the small things, like the small things that we anchor ourselves into, and like you said earlier, reassociating are things that normally bring up
Hmm.
fear or trauma for us. So I don't know,
Hmm.
like, where do you want to begin on this? What, like, I'm curious, like, just with you being where you were when we first started and where you are now,
Hmm.
if you could kind of like talk about the arc of that, and kind of just,
Yeah.
I don't know,
Yeah.
whatever you want to share about it.
Okay. Okay. Sure. Yeah. So, I think that's good because I I was experiencing a lot of external um, freedom and growth from the childhood I had,
Mm-hmm.
and yet I was still in the mindset of a lot of the lack and the survival and all of that. And I didn't even realize it because things were so much better
Mm-hmm.
than they had been. And so I'm like, what do I have to complain about? Like, and I just didn't even recognize how much I was in that lack mindset and kind of like felt powerless in my own choices in my own life situation.
Mm-hmm.
So so yeah, growing up in with a super strict controlling dad and really being kept at home and sheltered, and then in that homeschooling cult, and like having to confess sins to my dad every day, um, and not being allowed to talk to women or girls or even my mom for a huge stretch of years, like from 15 to 21. I wasn't allowed to talk to her about anything other than chores and like household stuff.
And what was
Um,
the reasoning for that again? I remember you telling me.
yeah, yeah, because my dad, well, when I was 15, he sat my brother and myself down. I'm the oldest of six, but there's some age gaps in there. And so my second brother and I were with him on a trip. And then I've got two other brothers that were 5 years younger that weren't on that trip. But he said that uh, basically, like a real man talks to a man.
Mm.
And if a man has to talk to a woman about his problems or issues or talk through things, then he's not a real man.
Wow.
And so he didn't want us talking to mom anymore because I was always close with my mom. And just, I mean, it makes total sense. Like I didn't feel safe with my dad. So like, I'm not going to talk to him about sensitive stuff, but I always felt safer with my mom. And but that was something that and I found out later from my mom that he like talked to her about it too.
Wow.
So like, but he would talk to all of us individually. Um,
Mm.
and so then we were isolated from each other. And so then, yeah, I really couldn't be transparent about like what I was going through or what my struggles were or whatever, with anyone basically, because I still didn't feel safe with him.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, from 15 to 21, and then it was when I was 22, I was brave enough to start rebelling and start reaching out and trying to figure out ways to be an adult and pursuing that growth. And so from 22 to my mid 30s, when I connected with you, um, that so much changed, and so it felt like, okay, like I have a long career in massage therapy and personal training and life coaching, and at that point would have been like 10 years. And so like things seem like they should be better, but I was still trying. I didn't realize I was doing things that had to make sense to everyone else. Like I had some different options when I chose to move to Michigan to that job, but in hindsight, realized I picked that job because it would make most sense to everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed the safest, the most secure. And it ended up being like a lot of good came out of it as well, for sure, including connecting with you and like really being driven to uh, like do some deep internal work. But it was kind of a nightmare. And it triggered like just the structure of things triggered all those um, challenges I had with authority and like feeling powerless in my own life because I have to make an authority happy.
Yeah.
And so like connecting with you and hearing your story, and then hearing your teachings, and then getting your guidance, like I think it was significant too that um, that you were a woman and are a woman, but that I was connecting with you
Mm-hmm.
in that way because um, like the feminine voice was what I'd been longing for a long time, and there was so much trauma that I was having a hard time connecting, and there was like sexual trauma and stuff too, but so it felt like from the outside I would have seemed like a very eligible bachelor, and yet I didn't feel like I could go on dates and things like that because of what I experienced. And so as a result, like I wasn't able to connect with a lot of women
Mm-hmm.
unless it was clear that it was just a work relationship or a platonic relationship or a friendship or whatever. And so being able to connect with you as as my mentor in that time period was like vital and very healing. And then to hear that you had similar journey and similar trauma and similar healing experiences, and we're practicing all those things yourself, and then for me to be brave enough to share where I was at with you, and then for you to be encouraging and kind and um, loving and giving guidance and tools was really powerful and exactly what I needed. And I kept signing up for more classes and getting more mentoring sessions and just kind of staying connected with you
Mm-hmm.
throughout that time. And so this morning, I just put in earnest money on a house that
Yeah.
I'm purchasing, that I hope to be able to offer massage and personal training, life coaching from myself. And so I can look back on the last 4 years and see just incrementally everything that's changed in my mindset and what I feel equal to, what I feel worthy of, and kind of owning myself and my journey.
Yeah. It's been so, well, I just love hearing it. I love hearing it in retrospect because as you were saying about how your dad didn't want you to talk to your mom. I remember when you first told me that, and I just like, it just startled my soul for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not even a mom yet. And I just felt
Mm-hmm.
like, oh my gosh, like I can't imagine someone telling my
Yeah.
son that they couldn't talk to me. And
Mhm.
when you said that, it was the first time I put together like how significant it is that you reached out to me. I didn't really
Yeah.
put that together
Oh,
to
yeah.
this moment for some reason. The fact that I'm a woman, and the
Yeah.
fact that for me, as we've worked together, and I feel like our relationship is shifting to colleagues now, because
Mhm.
you're just shifting into your zone big time. And I love that shift in our relationship. And what feels significant to me, or what's been significant this whole time, and actually healing for me as well, is you being so open and to share from
Mhm.
a like your perspective, not just as a man, but I mostly have connected with women most of my life, you know,
Mhm.
especially more like in a friendship, intimate way. And so even though it was I was mentoring you, I felt like
Mhm.
it was just really, you gave me access into an aspect of trauma that comes from abusive, oppressive systems,
Mhm.
and that just gave me a whole different perspective, because when I was younger, it was easy for me to just like believe that men were bad, you know, because
Mhm.
my dad was out of the
Right.
picture, he was abusive. My mom was a single mom, all the women in my life in my mind did everything. And
Mm.
even in the polygamy situation, women usually do everything and they usually
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
badasses of the whole situation. Like, so I feel like I grew up in a very feminine, strong, even though I wasn't really raised in the polygamy, and you know that, but even though that was in that I came from that, it still was like I just had a lot of strong feminine energy around me, and I didn't really get access to in a lot. I have my brothers, and they're amazing in so many ways, but I think just because I'm their sibling, it's like I didn't get access to that part that you gave me access to.
Mm.
And I think I had clients that had like one session from me that were male, but I'm pretty sure you were my first mentoring client that was a male, like someone
Okay.
who was regularly working with me like
Mm.
weekly. And that really shifted a ton for me. And you coming into my world, it really helped me in so many ways, just get a different perspective, to just soften a lot towards
Mm.
masculine energy. um,
Mhm.
and not only soften towards it, but then just starting to see the amazing, incredible beauty
Mhm.
and need for it. And when I say
Mhm.
masculine, and you know this, but I'm just saying this for anyone who'll be listening, I don't necessarily mean men and women. I'm just talking energy, like masculine,
Right.
feminine energy. I know that we all carry both. So,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
anyway, I wonder, I know that a lot of people who watch my channel come from a religious background. And
Yeah.
actually, just recently, I had a woman who signed up for a personal session with me and then canceled because something that I said really triggered her. And she was so cool because she messaged me and she was like, I want you to keep the money because I want to support you and I believe in what you're doing. But I was
Mm.
just really triggered and I have to honor this. And I asked her, I was like, I'm so glad you're taking care of yourself, but I'm really curious about what you were triggered about, because I want to
Mhm.
know, like, I know triggers are gold mines. And if someone's triggered enough to not feel safe with me anymore, it just makes me like wonder, what fault line did I hit, you know? And so
Mhm.
she messaged me back, and her message was so beautiful and amazing and sweet. And but what it was is she came from a religious background and has kind of transcended it more. I'm really paraphrasing what she said, and I only just literally read it right before we got on the call because she had just
Oh,
messaged me
wow.
back. But I think it's relevant because I read it and I was thinking, wow, her trigger is in the cult energy, just like mine. But
Yeah.
she has taken things like she heard me say certain things like how I don't trust the left or the right, and
Oh, sure.
different things that I've said. And she kind of was fearful that maybe I was a conspiracy theorist, or like in her
Oh,
mind that I can't see a clear enemy, that there might be something, um,
yeah.
you know what I mean? Whatever. And
Yeah,
my
yeah.
whole point is I've been thinking about, I actually, when I read her message, I felt my heart swell with love and gratitude for her. But also
Mm.
this, like, I could feel so strongly. And when
Mm.
you were talking just now, I like had this lump in my throat and I wanted to cry
Mm.
because
Mm.
the wound of oppression, you know,
Yeah.
especially, I'm not familiar with a lot of other forms of oppression, but specifically religious oppression, and just training someone out of their urge, and making you believe you're bad, and
Yeah.
and using fear, guilt, and shame to control behavior. and doing it in the name of God that's supposed to be loving, and just like
Right.
how fucking confusing that whole thing is, like how it can
Yep.
so fuck with you. And then and in the essence of it, there's actually this beautiful message that just gets completely distorted through all the control around it, you know? And
Mhm.
it's just, it can be so hard to get out of it. We get like that
Mhm.
reward punishment system is so intense, and it's not just in religion, it's in the secular world too, which I think is what triggered her, is that I believe
Mm.
that it's in the secular world. I'm not, again, I could be wrong about that, but that's kind of what I got from her message. But my whole point is, I realized, I think I'm pretty sure that a lot of people who watch my channel are right on that same fault line, because the fact that
Mhm.
I could trigger her enough to feel like, whoa, like this is unsafe completely. I love her, I respect her, whatever, but she's unhealed and there's something really scary about this. I thought,
Yeah.
I don't know. It just made me think like, we're all human. We've all been traumatized by the lack matrix. We've all
Mhm.
had our programming messed up. And it does feel really scary when someone offers a new idea or a new perspective, or brings up something that, especially when it brings up anything that felt oppressive to you
Yeah.
in the past.
Totally.
Anyway, I
Totally.
don't know why I went off on that, but I just am thinking about
Yeah.
the fault line of that. And I always think about you, because you opened my
Mm.
eyes in a whole different way, because I didn't experience the kind of trauma you went through. Mine was totally different. I don't feel like I was mind fucked like you were, you
Mm.
know, like
Mhm.
in a very really just messed up way, like the stories you told
Yeah.
me. And I know it came from a belief that from your dad, that he was doing the right thing. It came from, he was in deep, deep fear and wanted to control you
Yeah.
because he didn't
Yeah.
want you to suffer like he did, or I don't know, I think a fear of, I think he saw himself in you. And there's, I remember a few of our sessions feeling like sad for your dad, like wanting to cry inside, because I felt his fear, his
Yeah.
total complete fear, and his wanting to do the right thing so that he could be good and be enough, and wanting you to do the right thing so you could be good and you could be enough, and just, but in the meantime just causing insane amount of pain. And I think that's what
Mhm.
we do when we're in fear.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, like, knowing, I know we're not going into super detail about what you've gone through, but as you've worked your way into with these concepts, like with the abundance matrix and shifting your mindset, what do you feel like have been the most pivotal or powerful um, methods? I don't know what the right word is, or like concepts
Yeah.
that have actually worked.
Yeah. Well, I know like for the first couple years, the kind of validating the value of listening to your heart
Mm-hmm.
was absolutely huge for me because and this is all like hindsight, so kind of like reading back into my childhood, some of the significance of what happened. But I knew I always loved stories and I always connected with people, and I wasn't great at mechanical things.
Mm-hmm.
um, and like I remember as a little kid, my dad and my next brother and I would drive a lot together. We went to church with him and stuff. Um, and we would pass a construction zone, and my dad and my brother would be talking about all the machinery that were there and like wondering what they were doing and like what they were working on and what it would be like to run that piece of machinery.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have a clue what was there as far as the machinery because I was like looking at every person's face as I passed them and like feeling like I got a snapshot of what their day was like in that moment.
Interesting.
And so I was like, whoa, like is there something wrong with me? Like I totally don't know what equipment they had. And I don't know that I actually learned anything from the snapshot, but I like got a sense of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I loved reading from the time I was little and loved stories. And I could, like, my dad was concerned. He thought it was bad for my eyes to read as much as I did, and that it was an escape from reality. But I really loved the different realities that I could escape to.
Yeah,
And
exactly. Thank God for
and
imagination.
yeah, yeah. Um, And then he was also he would debate or kind of argue with me, and when he got angry, my mind would just go blank, and so like I couldn't engage with him, and I just felt completely powerless to even present where I was coming from, or my viewpoint on something, my experience of something, because my mind would just go blank. So I always felt kind of stupid for like being in tune with my heart, and it was from you that I learned that story is the language of the heart, and then you pointed out the Institute of Heart Math research that showed that the heart is 60 times more electrically powerful than the brain, and 5,000 times more magnetically powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, wow, like that is so validating, because like the heart literally does have reasons that reason knows not. Like
Yep.
that's so awesome.
Yeah.
And so it was like, especially as we were talking about that, and I was getting ready to leave my job and quit school in Michigan, and I was going to travel the country, and I didn't know what was coming next, but I knew my heart knew,
Mm-hmm.
and I knew that it was 5,000 times more capable of magnetizing the opportunities and the options and the doors that I needed as I moved forward, and that
Mm-hmm.
I could really trust. I didn't have to know exactly what the next steps were.
Exactly.
And so that like just knowing how amazing and powerful listening to the heart is, um, that was like the initial transforming concept.
Mm-hmm.
And then shadow contracts have been huge, and like understanding, like learning, like where I feel obligated in certain relationships to behave in certain ways,
Mm-hmm.
and like I have to do certain things, and I can't listen to my heart in those situations because I have to fulfill the contract,
Yep.
and I'm not really even realizing there's a contract there until I like start looking at that, like, wait a minute, why can't I do what I really want to do in this situation? And it's, oh, because I feel obligated
Mm-hmm.
in a certain way
Yep.
in order to keep their love, or to be on their good side, or to seem like a good person, or whatever it is. And so all the concepts within the jinn magic um, have been huge, like the looking for anomalies, and um, uh, the sovereignty, and uh, yeah, I'm drawing a blank on what
Witness.
they are right now, but what's that?
Witness. Witness was huge.
Witness. Yeah, that was the one I was trying to think of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of
And
felt like
like
you were for some reason.
switching from judgment to witness.
Yeah.
um yeah, I've just been thinking about that because that helps me recognize where I feel stuck in a
Mm-hmm.
storyline,
Yep.
where I start like being really harsh toward other people, and I'm like, why am I doing that?
Yep.
And I realize like I'm in self-defense mode, trying to protect myself from being judged, but I need to step back and be a witness.
Exactly.
But yeah, all of that kind of came out of really understanding the value and validating how amazing and powerful and beautiful my heart is, and that I really can trust it.
Yes. Yes. And I'm curious, because you came from a religious background, did you get raised with that idea that the heart is deceitfully wicked?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. Like you can't trust your heart.
Yep.
And that was like something my dad really latched on to the idea of authority,
Mm-hmm.
um, from the teachings that he got, like not necessarily from the Bible, but from teachings.
Right.
And and so he was convinced that like I could not hear God directly. Like he needed to interpret God's will for me, and God's direction for me. And
Wow.
so if something I said that I wanted for myself didn't line up with what he wanted, then it wasn't God, and I wasn't hearing from God.
Wow.
So and so then so he'd use a couple different verses. Like one would be rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically, if I said anything different than him or disagreed with him on anything, then I was rebelling, and I was getting counsel from Satan and all of that stuff. Yeah,
Yep.
practicing witchcraft. Um, and then yeah, so then it was also reinforced by the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked.
Yep. Yep.
Who can know it? Yeah.
Wow. And I think because that was huge for me. I would say for me in my journey, learning that I could trust my heart was the biggest thing too. I didn't know what to trust. Like to me, that literally not anything made sense to me. And I kind of, like I said, I didn't have what you had. I didn't have some authority figure in my younger years because I was with my mom. And my mom had left Mormonism, but and she became a Christian, but she was really laxed in the sense of what really transformed her was the concept of grace, because in her Mormon beliefs it was you have to earn your way to heaven. So I remember when she's like, I'm leaving the Mormon church and this is why, and she said it really simple, like how the Mormons believe it is that you're here and God's here and you have to climb a ladder to get to him.
Right.
And what Christians believe is how she said it, is that it's like a canyon, like here's God on this side and Jesus is the bridge, you just walk across.
Yeah.
And I remember as a kid being like, oh yeah, that makes way more sense. Like, and it just didn't, I didn't have to think about it after that. And my mom, I really watched her transform. She truly became a different person. But for her, it wasn't about religion, because in her mind, she had left religion and she found a relationship with God. So my mom was probably the first primary influence on me in terms of watching someone transform because of something inside of them rather than something outside being dictated to them. And for her, that's what her transformation was, is she was no longer going to be dictated to by an authority outside of her, that Christ lived within her. So for me, I clung on to that for a really, really long time because and she died. And so I naturally clung and I wanted to do everything she did. And I wanted to believe how she believed. And so I was seeking for that same transformative experience that she had in my own relationship with religion. But then I also, because she had died and I didn't know what the hell was going on in my life, and I didn't really know my dad, and my dad was more like your dad, not as extreme with me, with my other siblings he was. By the time I came around, he had loosened up a little around religion, but still very like in his ways, and very much the fear tactics, and hated that my mom became a Christian. And in the beginning, he blamed her cancer on the fact that she left the church. God punished her because she left Mormonism, and that's why she died. And so I kind of, all I wanted to do was seek, like, what's the right thing to do? I just want to be good and I want to be loved. And after my mom died, it was really when I realized love can be so conditional, because my mom truly loved me unconditionally. I don't ever remember feeling like I had to do something to earn her love. But after she died, I remember feeling like that didn't exist anymore, because my dad's love did not feel unconditional. It definitely felt conditional. Like, if you do these things, I'll love you. And if you don't do these things, not only will I not love you, but I will torture you, like psychologically torture you, and for the same reasons probably your dad did, out of fear. And so I know that I remember the concept of, like, I can listen to my own self. I can trust my heart. And I remember crying and crying and crying and crying when I realized, like, how much I had neglected my own heart and how good my heart was. And how I remember realizing that the things that my heart so deeply wanted was like intimacy and love and touch and allowance. And I remember thinking, how could those things be deceitfully wicked? Like, isn't that what every human wants? And of course, now in retrospect, I understand. I think I have my own interpretation of what that verse even meant, because I think if we're out of alignment, our emotions can take over and they can confuse us. You know what I mean? Living only from emotion and not from intellect or logic, it can throw us off. And that's kind of how I interpret that now. But I also, I don't know, that's a whole separate subject. I think the Bible's been like hijacked multiple times. So
and anything like that's, multiple millennia old, we're going to be further and further and translated multiple times, but we're going to be further and further removed from the original historical cultural context and the immediate context of who he was talking to and what was happening at the time, and all of that. And so like for us to take conversations that happened thousands of years ago and just assume we understand what it means just because we read it
Yep.
is kind of insane.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And to interpret it via our modern day culture, which a lot
Right.
of that stuff like literally is contextual.
Yeah. And we don't even realize that we're doing that, because it's so easy to do. We just like, we know what we know. We don't know what we don't know.
Exactly.
So it makes sense to us. And like we apply it in certain ways now, or we assume we are getting the interpretation based on what we know right now. And it's like, it could be totally wrong.
Exactly. Yeah. It freed me to realize that. I think for me, the further I've gotten away from religion, and the final thing for me was like when I decided I'm not calling myself a Christian anymore, because I realized as
Yeah.
soon as you say I'm a Christian, then you have the elite of Christianity believing
Yeah.
that they can have a say in your life and what you do, and like condemn you or withhold love from you if you don't follow and align with their teaching. And it's like that's when I started realizing like it's a war. There's a
Yeah, it is.
secret
Yeah.
war going on of beliefs, and we're all terrified. Like we're all like trying to defend what our belief is, and prove that it exists, and threatened by anything that's contrary. And I remember just realizing this is a joke. Why would I want to spend all of my creative energy literally wondering what the truth is and what the lie is, and who
Right.
the enemy is and who I need to go to battle with? Like I am so done with that. I'm
Yeah.
so done. And the things that always resonated with me about Jesus was transformation, because I literally watched the way my mom transformed by believing
Mm.
in love and forgiveness, and she literally believed that Jesus died and rose from the dead. And I actually do too. Like I
Yeah.
went away from it for a long time, and then the more I've gotten into the esoteric side of mysticism, the more I'm like, well, damn, what Jesus
Yeah.
was talking about was like exactly the thing I'm tapping into. And I think, I mean, obviously metaphysics,
Yeah.
and the fact that we're not subject to this reality. And obviously that goes into the more mystical side, which always was what drew me to religion, is the mysticism part,
Mm.
not the control part.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's
The winning,
winning. Yeah.
the
Yep.
being victorious and proving everybody else wrong.
Yeah. Being the best, being the elite, being over everything. And I remember being at church too, and after I was really getting disillusioned by it and thinking, this is it. Like,
Yeah.
this is really it. Like we really, if we're saying this is true, we believe that this man literally lived, was tortured, died, overcame death, rose again, and said, you're not subject to this world and you can do all the things I did. You even can do more. And here we are sitting in a gym, staring at each other and judging each other and having
Yeah.
cliques and singing songs. And it's like, great. And there's some communion there, but what the hell does any of this have to do with what Jesus did? Like, what is
Right.
this? I remember really
Yeah.
thinking, this is cute and this is great and it's a great community, but what the hell does this have to do with Jesus? Like,
Yeah.
now go forth and get a building in a gym or in a high school stadium and start preaching. I just didn't get. I just remember
Yeah.
thinking, like, I'm done with
Yeah.
it. Like this doesn't hold. And I'm not saying it doesn't have value, but for me, I just realized it was a step towards abundance, but it wasn't it. Like
Right.
I couldn't
Yeah.
imagine that the rest of my life, the thing I was going to be most excited about was going to a church gym.
Yeah.
That was that the church I went to, this big gym that we
Yeah.
sing songs in, and then like all kind of worry about what each other thinks, and I don't
Right.
know. I just remember, just once I saw through it, I could never go back. I just could never go
Yeah.
back. And I
Yeah.
started finding communion and connection outside of that structure, and I realized, oh, this is where communion is. For
Hmm.
me, with
Yeah.
people
For
like you,
sure.
with people who are like who aren't afraid to live outside of that box, you know
Yes. Yeah.
it's
For
an
sure.
exciting time because there's a massive exodus of people leaving like
Mm.
systems that are oppressive.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
Definitely. Yeah. I resonate with all of that. It was similar for me. I did have a couple different periods where I didn't go to church for a while, and then I did again.
Hmm.
And I found some like very different experiences within Christianity that were much more healing and supportive and grace filled and all of that. And so that was really positive. And then I felt led to attend this 1 year Bible school and learned what hermeneutics was, and the branch of philosophy, the art and science of interpretation. But a lot of Bible schools have it and apply it to the Bible, but it applies to anything. And so I ended up teaching that for the next 2 years at the school, and that was kind of like my exit out of Christianity as well, or at least the structure of modern Christianity, because the more I was teaching hermeneutics and studying the New Testament, the more it was like just being highlighted, the contrast between what was actually in the New Testament and what Christianity focuses on, and what the structure looks like, and the culture within Christianity. Like it's totally different. And I feel like most of Christianity has completely missed the point of the gospel. I feel like Christianity is a religion based on the Old Testament, or like misinterpretations of the Old Testament, and misinterpretations of Paul's writings primarily. Like they kind of forget about focusing on Jesus, because a lot of what Jesus says completely contradicts what is kind of essential basic doctrine within Christianity, at least the way Christians tend to live it.
Totally.
Politically and nationally and culturally. So so I can't, like, after a while I was like, I can't truthfully say I'm a Christian, because what Christianity has become is like nothing like what I resonate with. I do follow Jesus. I believe in Jesus. I do believe that God is love, and that our purpose is to love God, who is love, and love our neighbor. And I believe that we are all love, and that we come from love, and true religion is remembering that. That we come back to love.
The other day I had this thought come into my head, which I realized later actually comes from the Bible, but I had forgotten, because I used to read my Bible every day, like how you're taught to do. And then I realized, I need a huge break from this, because I had associations that immediately painted God like this angry, or like someone that I had to appease, or like my dad, or everything. I realized I just had too many negative associations with it, that I couldn't connect with it. So for a long, long time, and I still don't, once in a while I'll pull it out, but I don't have any connection to it right now. But I was meditating, and I've really been, ever since I got into quantum physics, I've been practicing the concept of making things small. So taking the big things that feel so overwhelming and breaking it down to its most simple element, and then shifting that. And the thought came to me, and I literally thought it was my thought. And then I realized, no, I've heard it somewhere. But a thought came to me that you could summarize everything that the Bible teaches through love your neighbor, like love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And I thought, if we really just did that, everything else would take care of itself. And then I was like, wait a second, didn't someone say that somewhere? That's what Jesus said specifically, like that whole law, the whole entire law could be summed up by those two laws. And that and I was like, it is actually so simple. Like everything else came from that. And it only was, any other law or any other system or whatever was created from that, or started in the first place from that, but it's amazing how those very things that were created then contradicted that. Used
totally
as a weapon against that. It's so interesting how that gets in and takes over.
That's one of my favorite verses to remember and to talk about, because with the idea of understanding interpretation, or like trying to figure out if your interpretation of a verse is accurate, like one of the principles of hermeneutics is that if you believe that the Bible is true, and of God or whatever, then you must believe that it agrees with itself. And so you can't have an interpretation of one verse that contradicts the interpretation of another verse.
Right.
And so then you have to figure out, you have to go from the top down. You have to go like big picture down and interpret from what you know for sure is true, and then use that as a guide to interpret the other verse that you're not sure your interpretation is correct.
Interesting.
And so like one of those things is that verse that would be like a huge overarching theme, because he said, like you said, uh, um, all of the law and the prophets, which was how they divided all of what we call the Old Testament and what at the time was all of Scripture in the Jewish world.
Yeah, interesting.
Like that was all of Scripture was divided into law and prophets. So everything, he said, everything would be fulfilled if you love God and you love your neighbor.
Mm.
And so, like, if you never read any other verse in the Bible, because if you believe that everything, all the scripture that came after that must agree with and align with all the scripture that came before it, if you believe it's true. If you don't, there's a different story. But if you do believe it's true, then you can trust that if you are loving toward God and the universe, and you are loving toward every person you come in contact with, including yourself, then you are doing everything that God desires.
Yes.
And it's like so reassuring.
Well, and I love that you just said, including yourself, because that's the other part that I'd missed in Christianity. Like, and it's not because of anyone's fault. I think I have friends who grew up in Christianity and grew up in a really solid, loving home, and with parents that weren't extreme, that just knew the essence of it and taught the essence of it, and it made their lives bloom, and it was good for them. And so we're talking, there's a big difference between someone who grew up like that and someone who grew up in a broken home with people who used the Bible and religion to manipulate and control. Like that's a whole different thing. But like I said, my mom didn't do that, but the systems around me, like that my dad, like there was the fighting around me, all of it to me used religion to manipulate people and control people. And I missed out on the part that I mattered in the equation. Yeah. Even though I remember my mom I remember one time I had a really bad nightmare. Before she died, I'd have nightmares all the time. And I think it's because I knew she was dying, but I didn't know like logically that's, and also I was being sexually abused, which I hadn't told anyone. So probably a combination of both. But I remember one time I woke up, I had this like demonic, terribly dark dream. And I was probably 10 or 11, and she died when I was 12. But I remember laying in bed and thinking, I have to have all my courage to run to her room. If I can just get to her room, I'll be safe. And so I gathered all my courage and ran as fast as I could into her room. I remember throwing open her door and then just sobbing because I was so scared. And I remember she woke up and held me, and she prayed with me, and she talked with me for a long time. And I remember her saying, not even a sparrow falls without God knowing. And he knows the number of hairs on your head. And those simple things that actually did something. I remember those words affecting me. I remember thinking, wow, like not even a bird can die without God knowing. And my mom just saying like, he loves you even that much more than that, and even more than I could love you. And even though she was still referring to him as masculine and all of that, I still I remember that affecting me, like those kind of the small again, it goes back to like the small things, like that those smallest things would matter. And that came back later in my life multiple times when I realized like, wow, the little things matter. It's not put yourself aside and put everything you are aside and everything you feel aside and all your hurt aside and just go serve another person and hope that God will reward you in the end for being good to other people. And I tried that for a long time, and there was reward in it to some, but I just felt more and more and more empty inside. Yeah. Because I didn't know that I mattered in the equation at all.
Yeah. I think that's such a beautiful example, because that was something that I was sensing as I was reading the Bible. Like it was required to read at least 5 minutes a day, but I ended up like 30 to 45 minutes a day, all through my teen years, and I was memorizing books in the New Testament. But I felt like the thing that I was struggling with was that the scriptures were trying to relay the heart of God,
Mm-hmm.
and Christianity was like trying to intellectually categorize and structure and formulate, like, what does God want from us,
Mm-hmm.
and then like turn it into an intellectual exercise rather than understanding the heart of God. And so um, what you were experiencing with your mom was the heart of God,
Yeah.
and what she was like relaying to you was the heart of God. And what you experienced with Mormonism and then with Christianity later was kind of that intellectualized, linear, rule-based structure of Christianity,
Yeah.
and trying to earn and be worthy.
Mm-hmm.
How long
Relatable.
were you with your mom between her leaving Mormonism and her passing away?
She left. See, their church was in Mexico. So
Oh,
part of the whole LeBaron
okay. Oh,
colony out
yes.
there is kind of infamous right now. But
Yeah.
but they never lived in Mexico. They would go on and off to Mexico to have their kids there because it was cheaper. So a lot of my siblings were born in Mexico. I
Hmm.
wasn't. But they left, I think, when I was around. My mom left my dad when I was like 5. And then she kind of we went to the LDS church at that point, because their church was a break off from the mainstream. So my mom let us go to church because I think she still wanted us to learn something, but she was just disillusioned by the whole bullshit. And she wasn't raised Mormon either. She was raised a Baptist. So for her, they
Oh,
didn't
wow.
even come from a Mormon background. So
Oh,
my dad was pretty persuasive to talk her and her sister into marrying him.
oh, wow.
My aunt was married to him first, and then my mom married him later. But
Hmm.
I my whole point is I was young and I didn't even know my parents were polygamous until like later in life. I never
Okay.
knew, because they also we had to be, my older siblings, remember, like flat out being told to lie about it because you could be taken away from we could have been taken away from them because it was illegal. So
Yeah.
anyway, my mom, there was a period where she wasn't really anything, but I think she still believed in Mormonism, but she wasn't practicing. And the Barons, not, there was just a whole massacre going on. Like the prophet of the church, his brother murdered him and said he was supposed to be the prophet. And then he started killing everyone who didn't agree with him and created a
Wow.
hit list, which I guess my parents were on the hit list. I don't know. They were killing like everyone who wasn't in agreement. And so I think that whole thing just really disillusioned my parents, obviously. And my mom was just nothing for a while. And then she became a Christian. What she would say, I think, is just that I found a relationship with God, like a
Hmm.
personal, intimate with relationship with God that had nothing to do with religion. Probably when I was about 10, it was around that time. Maybe I think we started going to that church when I was like 9. But yeah, like
Okay.
right around that time. So then we were going there until she died. And then I moved in with my dad, and he did not like that we went to that church at all. Like he hated
Hmm.
that whole thing. He thought the whole thing was ridiculous. Now he's become a Christian. He's like fast.
Oh, has he? Wow.
He left the church. Now he's like watching TV preachers and sending them money, like that type of Christian.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right.
So weird. And I'm like, what happened? Like, where? I don't understand, but whatever. It's it's such a weird transition. But yeah. So there was your question was like, what was the time period between that and
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I was curious about how much time did you have experiencing that from her, and I'm assuming that she was probably always just naturally pretty loving
yeah,
of a person,
she
and
was, to me especially because I was her youngest.
yeah,
I think
yeah,
I
yeah.
really lucked out of all my siblings because when the older kid, she was just pregnant constantly. She had 8 kids and she worked full time.
Wow.
She always worked and always supported us most of the time, I think all the time, completely by herself. So my older siblings went through a lot more because there was a time my mom was like stressed, just majorly stressed to the max and psychotic. But one thing that my
Yeah.
siblings always say, all my mom's kids, they always say the one thing about our mom is even when she got crazy, and psychotic because she was overwhelmed, we never questioned whether she actually loved us or not. But none of
That's
us
cool.
can say that about our dad.
Right.
So this is kind of a big difference.
Yeah. So then you experienced Christianity, kind of being involved with missions and stuff like that on a in-depth level for a while.
Yeah, I did.
And then what was it like leaving that?
Yeah.
And like processing your own beliefs, but also like the reaction from the people that you had served with or whatever.
Yeah. Well, that was like the pivotal time in my life because I went when I was 20 to Italy on a mission trip. It was like a 3-month mission trip, a summer mission trip with, at the time it was called Campus Crusade for Christ, but they've changed
Yes.
the name to Cru because they realized the word crusade is not very popular to
Yeah.
use.
Yeah. It kind of has some bad historical
Bad connotation.
reference.
Yeah, they've changed the name now. I honestly don't have anything bad to say about that experience. I loved it. I loved it. It was such a beautiful time. I learned so much, and I knew I wanted to go back for a year. And when we were there, we were working with a mission team that had been there for a year, and they were a year or two, because you could go for a summer trip and then sign up for a year and then stay up to 2 years. And then some people become like lifelong missionaries where they're missionaries as families through that organization. So I remember just thinking, oh my gosh, this is what I'm meant to do. I love this. And it wasn't like, because it was in Italy, it wasn't about converting people from Catholicism. Like that wasn't the goal. And they made that very clear. It was about teaching how to have a personal relationship with God through, and then teaching more Bible studies and stuff, because Catholics don't really do that. They may now, but in general, I don't think it's the thing to study the Bible in Catholicism. So that was kind of more what we did. And I developed a lot of really good relationships, but when I went to Italy back for the year, because I went for summer project and then I was like, okay, I'm going back. So I went home, spent a year raising money to go back for the year, then went back for a year. And during that time, that was the first time, other than the summer, that I had ever been that far away from my life, from my family, from my culture. I realized what a bubble Utah is, what a bubble I had been raised in. I truly didn't even know. I had no idea that there were even, this sounds crazy, but I didn't even know there were like atheists in the world. Like that's how deeply in, like everybody I knew was religious or raised like Mormon or Christian. I didn't know there was like, I knew there were other religions, but I didn't know that there was like people who just weren't religious at all. I didn't even have that concept. And I just grew up a lot in Italy. And the thing that Italy, the short answer to this is, Italy brought up my trauma. I had never told anybody about the sexual abuse. And it was a neighbor that we had in a neighborhood that we'd grown up with for a while. And he used to be a bishop in the Mormon church and was very well respected in the Mormon church. So he was older though. So everyone loved him. And I never wanted to like ruin that image, and he had died by the time I ended up telling anyone. He had already passed away. But so that started coming up. I started dreaming about it a lot. I started having dreams about it. I started missing my mom like I had never missed her before. I started grieving my mom's death because I didn't know how to grieve. No one in my family knew how to grieve. My dad had no clue how to grieve. My dad had no clue how to be there for me. He never even talked about my mom. It's like my mom died. I moved in with him. I didn't really know him. And it was like she never existed. And not only did he not talk about her, but if he did reference her, he would just talk about how she didn't raise me well. Like, that she must have me, basically.
That's so sad.
Yeah. So it was like all that came up in Italy. And I remember just crying. I started crying and I couldn't stop. Like I just was having nightmares. I was crying constantly. I remember being in the shower once and we were supposed to get ready to go for, I don't know, some Bible study I was supposed to teach. And I couldn't get out of the shower because I couldn't stop crying. Because I just felt this level of like this depth of pain in my soul that I just was like, I miss my mom. I don't understand this life. Like, I don't understand. It was just weird. It was like a very weird time. And I've shared this before, but right around that, I had one of those days I woke up and I had a nightmare about stuff that happened when I was younger. And I remember hearing this like audible voice in my head. Literally, I've heard audible voices multiple times, especially when I was little. And I heard, open your Bible. And the Bible was right next to me. So I grabbed it and it was just like, open it. And I just opened it and it just fell into a verse in Isaiah. I can't remember which one it was, but the words, it felt like jumped off the page, and it said, as a mother comforts her child, so I will comfort you. And I
Wow.
remember that was so pivotal to me because it was the first time that I had ever thought of God as a mother.
Yeah.
And I remember that was so transformative for me because I needed a mom, and my dad just wasn't there. He has unresolved trauma himself. He had no idea how to love, how to show love, how to be there. And so I just felt so alone, emotionally, completely alone, especially after my mom died. And I remember just that moment, I felt like I was hugged, like just this huge hug came, and I felt like my mom, but also like something great, like the goddess. And I felt like
Wow.
I didn't have the word. I wouldn't have said the goddess, but and the verse goes on to say, I will carry you at my breast. I will feed you by my breast. Like all this mother feminine energy. And I was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
whoa, where was this? Like it activated something in me, like that God could be feminine, that God could
Yeah.
be expressing itself as a woman. And there was, because my mom was just this huge, obviously, role in my life, and then this major wound and emptiness that was left when she left. That was the first moment that it was like, oh, okay, I didn't lose my mom. I still have a mom, because I
That's
thought
so
my mom
cool.
died, and then I just had this God in the sky that I didn't have any clue about, that was kind of
Right.
weird. And then my dad, who I had no clue about, who also treated me like shit. So I kind of just assumed God was like my dad. But I was
Sure.
trying to reconcile that with Jesus because I really resonated with Jesus. But I didn't understand God. Like I didn't get it. I didn't get how they fit, like how God of the Old Testament was anything like Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Totally.
that's my long answer. But
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
said,
That's
how
cool.
was it? I think your main question was like, how was it for the transition out, right?
Yeah. Right. Right.
And that, so
Yeah.
that
Because that was that a little bit later, or
so that happened in Italy. Yeah, the transition happened a few years later. So I ended up
okay.
leaving Italy early to get therapy because I just I couldn't deal with anything. And
Yeah.
everyone was great. My team was great. The people were great. They suggested it, like maybe you could finish off your mission trip in Oregon. This is why I went to Oregon, because the headquarters for the Northwest region was in Oregon. So they were like, you
Okay.
can kind of do office work and finish off your mission and get therapy. And so
Yeah.
I started going to therapy, and therapy is what ultimately led me out of Christianity. Ironically,
Okay.
even though my therapist was a Christian,
Oh,
and
that's amazing.
it wasn't necessarily, she was a great therapist though. She wasn't like, she didn't advertise herself as a Christian. I only just happened to knew because the counselor I was working with through Campus Crusade suggested her to me. So,
Okay.
but anyway, that therapy and going through my trauma and really getting into like what the hell was going on and how deeply programmed I had been, and the grief that I never got to experience, all of it eventually just like I started. And I was taking this religious class, this philosophy of religion. It was a philosophy class. That class undid me as well. And ironically, the professor was a Christian. I didn't know that till later. I went to Portland State. So, well,
Okay.
Portland Community College and then Portland State. So I had no idea until after the class was over that she was Christian, but that class was like the final nail in the coffin. I was like, I don't believe it anymore. Like what
Yeah.
I left out of that class was I no longer believe the Bible is inerrant. Like I no
Right.
longer
Right. Right.
believe that it has no flaws and it's this perfect thing, and that everything about your life should be done according to that. And once
Right.
I left that, I kind of unraveled for a while, and that was hard for everyone because I was kind of a leader in that world, and all my friends were from Italy. Like even my roommates at the time, they had finished off the Italy trip but came back, and we all lived together in
Wow.
Oregon. So I had a really tight group of people, and I loved them. And I had so many powerfully transformative experiences in that Christian world. They were all really cool. But when I started transitioning out, that's when it was like, when I said I was questioning whether God exists and all that, everyone was kind of okay with it. Like, yeah, go through your thing. It's good to question, blah, blah, blah. But then
Yeah.
when I
Yeah.
started dating a woman, which I told you about, because I've met
Yeah,
her
totally.
through a Bible study. She had never been a Christian, never grew up Christian. She grew up in Oregon, but she and I think we connected through trauma bonding, honestly.
Mm.
And I so deeply, like, for me, after my mom died, I just craved feminine. I wanted to be around women. I wanted to be with women. I felt like I didn't even, men weren't even hardly on my radar. And
Sure.
I kind of wondered when that happened, like, am I gay? Like, what does this mean? And then that, of course, brought a whole existential crisis because of how I was raised. Like, that must be
Yeah.
wrong. And then my friends from church, from that organization, all had a very, other than one, except for one, they all had a really, really, that kind of tore us all apart, and it was
Wow.
hard for them. And I understand why. And since then, some of them have apologized about how they acted
Mm.
during that time, which has been really cool. But
That's amazing.
yeah, but it was like, that's kind of what unraveled the whole thing. Like, it was okay to, and then it really went, I thought, this is interesting. It's, if I'm questioning whether I believe God even exists, like, no one's worried. But as soon as I say, hey, I'm dating a woman, it was like they had an emergency prayer meeting for me. And it was like this huge thing. And I had friends that called my other friends in Italy and told my friends in Italy, my Italian friends,
Oh,
like, they
wow.
told people, like, all of a sudden everybody knew, because I told my
Yeah.
tight group of friends, and then they told everybody. And it was just one of those experiences where I was like, okay, I'm taking a super long time answering your question, but, like,
No, that's great.
it's really what made me go, I remember realizing I will never, ever, ever want to develop a community of friends anymore that is based on the fact that we have to agree about every little thing. And as soon as I don't agree with you anymore, you're no longer my friend, which I feel
Yeah,
like is going on politically right now. And it's been triggering.
totally.
It's totally,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah. So anyway, that's
Yeah.
the long
Because
answer.
yeah, no, that's great. Yeah. That's kind of an awesome way to exit.
Yeah.
Uh,
It really was. It was just over at that point. I was like, well, I'm out. Like, I'm
yeah,
all the
I
way
guess this is it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like, yeah, like you said, there's like a lot of, I think, yeah, there's so many insecurities and fears being triggered just in the world right now, that people are in that place of giving ultimatums. Like, if you vote for so and so, then delete me off your friends list because I don't want to know you, kind of thing.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's just like really, really intense.
Yeah.
But I feel like, kind of like how that season for you was, um, like what shunted you into a whole new way of life, and kind of like being a lot more authentic, and allowed you to rebuild a community of people that, are supportive and,
Mm.
unconditionally loving, and can be with you regardless.
Yep.
um, I do feel like, and trust that that's happening with the world right now, and with the country, and that, those of us that are able to move through, and build communities authentically on the other side, it is going to be that much closer to heaven on earth,
Yeah.
and we are going to be experiencing, all the things that we thought we were hoping to experience within Christianity, or
Exactly.
whatever.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, and I find that it's been so healing to connect with people like you who get it. Like, most of my deep communion now is with people who have left religion.
Mm.
Most of my close friends also grew up Christian and or some other religion, and then left it. And there's such a commonality in that. And
Yeah.
if you can get past the extreme, going from here to then swinging to the extreme and then kind of swinging back, which it sounds like you did that a little bit, like you went back and in and then kind of out. But I feel like when the pendulum stops swinging so extreme, the sweet spot is right here in the middle.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
the sweetest spot. I'm finally at the place where I don't feel angry at Christianity anymore. I was angry
Yeah.
for a long time. I just felt angry, like hurt and angry and infuriated. And And I feel like I've finally come to the other side where I can actually feel a lot of appreciation and gratitude for everything I've experienced, all of it, including the sexual abuse, including all of it, because I've got so much an insane amount of data and
Mm-hmm.
wisdom from it, you know, that, and
Yeah.
also I can hold space for people. And that in and of itself is needed. Like those of us who've been through stuff and been out the other side, people need someone who can witness them without judging them or without being in
Yeah.
fear and feeling like I better control what you believe and what you think because you're making me afraid. And
Yeah.
until you get to the conclusion of believing the right thing, you're unsafe.
Right.
You know, like you need
Totally.
to believe
Yeah.
what I believe or believe the safe thing or believe the right thing. And if you really look at it, it's always a war of beliefs. It's
Yeah.
always a war about beliefs. And
Yeah.
that's why I think really the lucid place to get is realizing all beliefs exist and
Yeah.
everyone can live out their beliefs and find evidence of it. So the real
Yeah.
question is what beliefs actually serve you and which ones don't.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, like Paul said, everything is lawful, but not all things are beneficial.
Yes,
Like
exactly.
everything is allowed, but not everything is beneficial. So then switching from thinking, is this right or is this wrong? Is this beneficial
Exactly.
to me?
Is it beneficial to
And
me and to the growth of everyone? Like to have to me, it's the win-win-win. If it's not a win-win-win, it's not beneficial.
yeah,
If it's in
totally.
lack, it's not beneficial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool.
This is cool. I feel like I don't know how long we've been talking actually, a little over an hour. But
Yeah.
I feel like we could because here's what I'm thinking. If you're open, I would love to have a part 2 conversation because I feel like this has been just really cool in terms of our background and I feel like it's going to resonate with a lot of people who have a
Yeah.
similar story as us. But I also I so want to have you on and talk about the body and like
Yeah.
overcoming because you're a body worker and you are so deeply connected to it and you've had your own issues like really with understanding fatigue in the body and how it relates to being empathic and all of those things. And I think that's where a lot of
Yeah.
the wisdom is. And I would love to like pull it out in another conversation if you're open.
That'd be so fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. That'd be really fun.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, thank you for joining me on this call. And
Yeah.
is it okay if I put all your information in the description link so if people want to find you and what you do and
Yeah.
platform
That'd
stuff?
be great. Yeah, for
Okay.
sure.
All right. Well, thanks so much for chatting with me and let's do it again soon.
That sounds good. Thank you.
Yep.